Trapped deep within Red Canyon, Texas, SEAL Team 12 had walked straight into a brutal ambush. Enemy fire pressed in from three directions, sealing off every path of retreat. Their last exit was gone. Static hissed through the comms as a voice fought to break through. Immediate assistance needed. Grid 17 Alpha, no overwatch, no sniper cover. But the only thing that answered was dead air. The 12-man team pressed tight against whatever rock they could find, but the cover was thin, fragile, exposed. Machine gun fire swept across them like a blade, pinning them down hard. Contact left, contact right. The shouts rang out through the chaos, barely rising above the roar of sustained gunfire. Lieutenant Commander Reeves pressed his back against the cold stone as rounds impacted inches from his head. Three of his snipers were already down. The rest of his men were scattered across the ravine floor, caught in the perfect kill box. Their satellite communications operator lay unmoving behind a small outcropping, his equipment shattered beside him. Through his tactical scope, Reeves could make out the enemy positions, not standard insurgents. These men moved with military precision, armed with Russian AK-103s and the distinctive silhouette of RPG-7 V2s. Even worse, thermal imaging equipment glinted on their helmets. Cutting-edge gear that no local militia should possess. Ammo was running critically low. Medkits had already been drained, treating the worst of the injuries. The mission clock ticked mercilessly forward. 28 minutes until they would be officially overdue. Another 30 before anyone would consider them missing. Too long, far too long. Sergeant Collins slid beside him, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. Sir, East Ridge is completely covered. They've got a belt-fed PKM locking down our exfil route. Reeves nodded grimly. How many rounds you got left? Half a mag. Peterson's down to his sidearm. And radio? Still nothing. Jammer somewhere in the valley. Reeves checked his watch again. His men were among the best trained fighters on the planet, but they were human. Flesh and bone against metal and fire. Without support, without overwatch, the math was brutally simple. They weren't walking out of here. Then against all odds, a single shot sliced through the cool dawn air. It slipped cleanly through a narrow crease in the stone, traveling an impossible distance. The impact struck true landing with cold, exacting accuracy. The PKM gunner on the ridge fell silent. A low female voice came over the auxiliary frequency. Paladin active, providing cover. Collins froze, his eyes widening. Sir, did you hear that, Paladin? Reeves nodded, disbelief etched across his features. I thought that was just a story they told recruits. Sir, if that's really her. Another shot rang out. Another enemy fighter dropped. Doesn't matter who it is, Reeves said, newfound resolve hardening his voice. We've got to overwatch. Prepare to move. 23 miles away at Redstone Training Facility near Fort Bragg, the day had begun like any other for Morgan Reynolds. Her small frame stood motionless in the armor, her slender fingers working methodically across the barrel of a Barrett M82A1 50 caliber rifle. Chestnut hair pulled back in a tight military bun, sharp gray eyes hidden behind dark aviators despite the dim indoor lighting. At 35 years old, she moved with the quiet precision of someone who had spent a lifetime making herself invisible. The walls of her workshop were lined with rifles in various states of disassembly. Each one meticulously organized, each tool precisely placed. To the casual observer, she was just the base weapons maintenance technician. The quiet woman who kept to herself, fixed broken equipment, calibrated scopes, ran barrel harmonics tests. Nothing more. As she worked, Morgan listened to the facility radio scanning through channels. A habit she never explained to anyone. Old frequencies from operations long since declassified. Weather broadcasts, local chatter. Her fingers never stopped moving, testing the action of the bolt, checking the crown of the barrel for microscopic imperfections invisible to anyone else. On the workbench beside her sat a worn leather notebook filled with calculations. Wind speeds, humidity levels, barometric pressure, information no mere maintenance tech would need. But Morgan recorded it all every day without fail. The door to her workshop swung open. Master Sergeant William Blackwood entered, his imposing frame filling the doorway. At 68 years old, Old Eagle Blackwood remained as formidable as men half his age. A legend from the Cold War era with piercing blue eyes that had seen more than most could imagine. His silver hair was cropped in the same military cut he'd worn for 45 years. Morning, Morgan, he said, his voice a graveled rumble that carried the weight of decades of command. She offered a slight nod without looking up from her work. Morning, Sergeant. Blackwood moved to the workbench, examining the rifle she was servicing. His weathered hands traced the barrel with the reverence of someone who understood what the weapon truly was. Not just metal and polymer, but an extension of the person who wielded it. "Beautiful piece," he said, adjusting the harmonic stabilizers again. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Barrel was vibrating at 32.4 hertz. Should be at 31.8 for optimal grouping. Most people wouldn't notice half a hertz difference. Most people aren't shooting at extreme ranges. Old Eagle chuckled. True enough. He paused, watching her hands move across the weapon, the way her fingers positioned themselves, the subtle shifts in her breathing as she sighted down the scope, movements ingrained through thousands of repetitions under pressure. He'd seen it before in another lifetime, in people who were far more than technicians. "Captain Mitchell is bringing in the new sniper candidates today," he said casually. Morgan's hands paused for just a fraction of a second, almost imperceptible. "I heard. He wants all the long guns checked and zeroed by 900. They will be." Old Eagle nodded, then leaned against the workbench. He also said, and I quote, "I don't need the gun janitor getting in my way when I'm training real shooters." This time Morgan did look up, a flash of something cold behind those aviators. Then it was gone, replaced by professional indifference. "The rifles will be ready. That's my job." Blackwood watched her for a long moment. "You know, Mitchell's never seen real combat, not the kind that matters. Neither have most people here." Morgan returned to her work, hands steady, voice neutral. Before Old Eagle could respond, the workshop door swung open again. Captain Mitchell stood in the doorway, ramrod straight, in his pristine uniform. At 42, he projected the confident authority of a man who believed in his own legend. Behind him, 6 recruits stood at attention, their expressions a mixture of eagerness and uncertainty. Blackwood, Mitchell nodded curtly. "I need those Barrett rifles for the demonstration." "Morning to you too, Captain," Old Eagle responded, his tone just civil enough to avoid insubordination. "Morgan's just finishing the calibrations." Mitchell's gaze swept dismissively over Morgan. "We're starting in 15 minutes. These men need to see what a real sniper can do with proper equipment." He emphasized the word real with unmistakable condescension. Morgan stood lifting the Barrett with practiced ease, despite its considerable weight. "The rifle is ready, Captain. I've adjusted the scope for the morning humidity and wind conditions." Mitchell took the weapon without acknowledgement, examining it with obvious skepticism. "You set the zero at 1,000 yards." "Yes, sir." "And the windage?" "Compensated for the 8-mile-per-hour crosswind on the East Range." One of the recruits behind Mitchell snickered quietly. 8 miles per hour, weather report says 5. Morgan remained perfectly still. "The weather station is in the valley. Wind speed increases by approximately 60% on the ridge where you'll be shooting." Mitchell frowned. "I've been running this course for 3 years. The wind doesn't hit 8 until afternoon." "With respect, sir, there's a low-pressure system moving in from the west. The barometric shift is accelerating the air movement through the valley." The captain's expression hardened. "I don't need weather forecasts from maintenance personnel, Ms. Reynolds." He turned to the recruits. "Let's go. We're burning daylight." As they filed out, Old Eagle noticed how Morgan's gaze tracked them, not with resentment, but with something else. Something like professional assessment. The way a teacher might watch students who didn't yet realize they were being evaluated. "He's going to miss at 1,000 yards, she said quietly after the door closed. Old Eagle raised an eyebrow. "You're sure of that? The scope is calibrated correctly, but he won't account for the wind shift." "And you didn't tell him because—" Morgan turned back to her workbench. "He didn't ask." Later that morning, as predicted, Captain Mitchell's demonstration shots grouped wide right at the 1,000-yard target. Morgan heard the results through the facility grapevine, but showed no reaction. She simply continued her methodical work, moving through the armory with silent efficiency. What most people at Redstone failed to notice was how Morgan always chose positions that gave her clear sight lines to all entrances. How she could identify incoming vehicles by engine sound alone, naming the model before they appeared around the bend. How she moved through the corridors without making a sound, appearing beside people who had no idea how she got in there. In her private quarters, far from prying eyes, the walls told a different story than the Spartan image she projected. Topographical maps covered one entire section, marked with coordinates, wind patterns, and elevation changes. Not just of the training grounds, but of the surrounding 50 miles. Each annotation meticulously detailed, each landmark cataloged with military precision. Under her bed, secured with a biometric lock, lay a steel case that never opened in the presence of others. And on her nightstand, a single photograph in a simple frame. A team of 8 operators in desert camo faces obscured by tactical gear. Only Morgan was identifiable, standing slightly apart from the group, her posture unmistakable, even beneath body armor. The inscription read simply, Chimera Unit Sandstorm 2009. That evening, as most of Redstone settled into their routines, Morgan sat alone in the mess hall. She ate mechanically, her attention seemingly focused on nothing. In reality, she was cataloging everyone around her. Old habits, the tense posture of a junior officer who'd just been reprimanded, 2 instructors discussing equipment failures from the morning exercise, the subtle limp of a staff sergeant hiding an injury to avoid medical leave. Old Eagle slid into the seat across from her, placing his tray down with deliberate noise. Most people announced themselves around Morgan, those who knew better anyway. Mitchell's blaming the rifle for his miss, Blackwood said without preamble. Morgan sipped her water. Of course he is. Says the scope must have been misaligned. The scope was perfect. Old Eagle studied her for a moment. You know, most technicians would be worried about getting reprimanded. I'm not most technicians. No, he agreed quietly. You're not. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I saw that look in your eyes this morning, when Mitchell brought in those recruits. I've seen it before. In Beirut back in '83. Morgan stiffened almost imperceptibly. It's the look of someone who sees everything, Old Eagle continued. Someone who's watching the world through a scope even when there's no rifle in their hands. For a long moment, Morgan said nothing. Then you were never in Beirut, Sergeant. The corner of Old Eagle's mouth twitched. No, I wasn't. But you knew that already. She set her fork down carefully. What do you want? Just making conversation with a colleague. We're not colleagues. You train operators, I fix equipment. Old Eagle leaned back. Time was people like us, fought for honor, not statistics. For the man beside us, not for lines in a report. Morgan's hand tightened around her water glass. Those times are gone. Are they, or are they just waiting for the right person to remember them? Before she could answer, the facility's PA system crackled to life. All personnel equipment inspection at 0600 tomorrow. Repeat full equipment inspection 0600 hours. Old Eagle stood collecting his tray. You should join us on the range tomorrow. See those new recruits in action. That's not my job. Maybe it should be. As he walked away, Morgan remained motionless, her food forgotten. Old Eagle's words had stirred something she'd spent years burying. Memories of another life, another person, someone who didn't hide in workshops and armories, someone whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear, someone who had failed when it mattered most. That night, as she had every night for the past 2 years, Morgan woke gasping from the same nightmare. Desert heat, the smell of cordite and blood, voices screaming over comms as the mission collapsed around them, and always the knowledge that despite her skill, despite her perfect shots, she couldn't save them all. She rose from bed and moved to the window of her quarters, looking out at the dark expanse of Redstone. The facility slept, but Morgan knew better than most that danger never rested. Her fingers traced the edge of the windowsill, feeling for imperceptible changes. Another habit from another life. In the corner of her room, a small handheld radio sat charging. Standard issue for maintenance personnel, meant for internal communications only. Morgan kept it on at all times, scanning frequencies automatically. Not because of regulations, because some part of her was always listening, always waiting. Morning brought the routine she had perfected. Physical training before dawn, shower, protein bar for breakfast. In the workshop by 0630, 30 minutes before she was required to be there. The day's first batch of rifles already disassembled, cleaned and reassembled before most personnel had finished their coffee. At precisely 0800, as Morgan was recording barrel harmonics in her leather notebook, the handheld radio beside her crackled with unusual activity. Immediate assistance needed? Grid 17 Alpha, no overwatch. The transmission cut through static bleeding into a frequency it shouldn't have accessed. A frequency no one at Redstone was actively monitoring. No one except Morgan. She froze, the pen in her hands suddenly motionless. The voice was strained, professional, but desperate. The unmistakable sounds of combat formed the transmission's backdrop. Gunfire, shouted commands, the distinctive crack of rounds impacting stone. No sniper cover. SEAL Team 12 requesting immediate, heavy casualties. The transmission faded back into static. Morgan stood perfectly still, her breathing controlled despite the sudden acceleration of her heart rate. SEAL Team 12, Red Canyon Training Area, an unscheduled exercise that had gone catastrophically wrong. Or not an exercise at all. Her mind processed the coordinates automatically. Grid 17 Alpha, approximately 23 miles northwest of Redstone. Difficult terrain, limited access points. A natural ambush location that any experienced tactical planner would avoid, unless they had no choice. The radio crackled again. Hostiles on all sides, advanced equipment, request immediate evac. More static, then nothing. Morgan moved to the reinforced steel cabinet in the corner of her workshop. Her fingers hesitated over the keypad muscle memory, fighting with a promise she had made to herself. A promise never to return to that life, never to become that person again. But some oaths outweighed others. She entered the code. The cabinet opened with a pneumatic hiss revealing contents that no weapons maintenance technician should possess. A custom CHATAC M200 intervention rifle, .408 caliber. Not government issue. No serial number. The burnished sienna finish absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Beside it, specialized ammunition in a sealed case. A ghillie suit compressed into a vacuum-sealed bag. A tactical harness with minimal profile. Equipment for an operator, not a technician. As Morgan reached for the rifle, the workshop door opened. She turned, already calculating escape routes. Defensive positions the distance to her sidearm. Old Eagle stood in the doorway, his expression grim. You heard it too. It wasn't a question. Morgan's hand remained on the rifle. This isn't your concern, Sergeant. The hell it isn't. Blackwood stepped inside, closing the door behind him. SEAL Team 12 walked into something they weren't prepared for. How do you know about the transmission? Old Eagle's gaze moved to the open cabinet, to the specialized equipment that Morgan Reynolds' weapons technician had no business possessing. Because I knew who you were the moment you arrived at Redstone. His voice softened. Paladin? The name hung in the air between them. A call sign that belonged to another lifetime. A ghost from classified mission reports. A legend that younger operators whispered about during late-night deployments. Morgan's jaw tightened. That person doesn't exist anymore. Then who's reaching for that rifle? Her hand fell away from the weapon. 23 men are about to die if they don't get support. And you're going to provide it alone against what sounds like a professional ambush team. I've done more with less. Old Eagle moved closer, his voice dropping. I know what happened in Afghanistan, Operation Sandstorm, the Chimera unit. Morgan went completely still, her expression unreadable behind the aviators. Those files are classified beyond your clearance. Some things don't need clearance. Some things you just know. He gestured to the open cabinet. Like I know that rifle, custom-built CHATAC, one of only 3 ever made with that barrel configuration. Despite herself, Morgan was impressed. How could you possibly know that? Because I helped design it. Old Eagle's eyes held hers. Before your time, there were others who did what you did. Different names, different wars, same principles. For the first time, Morgan truly looked at William Blackwood, not as the aging instructor she'd dismissed, but as something else, someone who might understand the weight she carried. I swore I'd never fire another shot in combat, she said, the words coming unbidden. After what happened to my team, after I failed them. Old Eagle's expression softened. Sometimes a rifle isn't for taking lives. Sometimes it's for saving them. The radio crackled again. More desperate voices, more gunfire. You have approximately 19 minutes before those men are overrun, Old Eagle said. I have a vehicle ready. Your call, Paladin. Morgan stood motionless for exactly 3 seconds. Then her training took over. She removed the CHATAC from its housing, performing a rapid function check with practiced precision. The action was smooth perfect. She'd maintained it weekly despite her vow never to use it again. I'll need a spotter, she said, reaching for the ammunition case. Old Eagle nodded, like the old days. This isn't the old days. Morgan secured the rifle in its transport case. And I'm not Paladin anymore. Then who are you? She paused at the door, the weight of the rifle case familiar in her hand. Someone who won't let another team die if I can help it. They moved through the facility with purposeful speed, avoiding the main corridors. Morgan led the way, her knowledge of Redstone's camera blind spots and patrol patterns revealing years of careful observation. Within minutes, they reached a service exit rarely used by regular personnel. A weathered Jeep Wrangler waited outside its faded green paint and mud-spattered chassis, suggesting frequent off-road use. Old Eagle slid behind the wheel as Morgan secured the equipment in the back. We've got 16 minutes to get into position, she said, checking her watch. Old Eagle gunned the engine. I know these back roads better than anyone. We'll make it. As they sped away from Redstone, Morgan allowed herself one backward glance. For 2 years, the facility had been her sanctuary, her penance, a place where Morgan Reynolds, weapons technician, could atone for the failures of Paladin elite sniper. Now those worlds were colliding, and she wasn't sure which would survive the impact. The Jeep tore along dirt access roads that didn't appear on civilian maps. Old Eagle handling the vehicle with the confidence of someone who had driven these routes countless times. Morgan used the transit time to prepare, assembling her rifle with mechanical precision, checking each component with methodical focus. "Your father would be proud," Old Eagle said, suddenly his eyes fixed on the rough road ahead. Morgan's hands stilled. "You didn't know my father. Alan Reynolds, 75th Ranger Regiment, killed during the Grenada intervention in 1983. She turned to look at him, genuine surprise breaking through her carefully maintained composure. "How do you know that?" "I served with him. Not in Grenada, before that. Your old man was one of the best marksmen I ever met." Old Eagle navigated around a particularly rough section of road. "When I saw your name on the Redstone transfer papers 2 years ago, I wondered if it was coincidence." "It wasn't," Morgan admitted, quietly returning to her preparations. "He died saving his unit. Did they tell you that?" "They told me he was a hero." Her voice carried no emotion. "Heroes leave behind graves and medals. Not much comfort for the families." Old Eagle nodded slowly. "After Afghanistan, after what happened to Chimera, you could have gone anywhere. Why Redstone? Why hide your abilities?" Morgan chambered around, the metallic sound crisp in the confines of the Jeep. "Because I was tired of watching people die in my scope." And now, she adjusted the rifle stock against her shoulder, feeling the familiar weight. "Now I'm going to try to prevent it instead." The Jeep crested a ridge, and suddenly the vast expanse of Red Canyon spread before them. In the distance, the faint percussion of gunfire echoed across the landscape. "Grid 17 Alpha is in that southeastern depression," Old Eagle said, pointing. "Natural choke point, terrible place to be caught without overwatch." Morgan scanned the terrain through her spotting scope. "There, that western ridge. We'll have angle on the entire valley from there." Old Eagle checked his watch. 9 minutes until they're completely overrun, based on what we heard. Then we'd better hurry. They positioned themselves on the ridge with practiced efficiency. Morgan went prone, settling the Chaytak on its bipod, her body automatically assuming the perfect shooting posture. Old Eagle lay beside her with a spotting scope, already calculating environmental factors. "Range to target is 740 meters," he said. "Humidity at 42%. Temperature 82 degrees Fahrenheit." Morgan made minute adjustments to her scope. "Wind, variable, 8 miles per hour from the northwest, but gusting to 12 in the valley." She inhaled slowly, feeling the familiar calm settling over her. The world narrowed to data points and physics equations. Trajectory, windage, barometric pressure. The rotation of the Earth beneath the bullet's flight path. At this distance, even the curvature of the planet had to be accounted for. Through her scope, Morgan could see the desperate situation below. SEAL Team 12 was pinned down in exactly the scenario their radio transmission had described. No escape routes, dwindling ammunition, multiple casualties already visible. "Target identification," she asked, her voice now completely devoid of emotion. Old Eagle surveyed the scene. "Primary threat is the PKM gunner on the eastern ridge, suppressing the entire southern escape route." Morgan adjusted her aim, accounting for all variables. Distance, wind, the slight variations in air density between her position and the target. Elevation adjustment complete. Wind correction applied. "I have control." "Send it," Old Eagle confirmed. Morgan exhaled half a breath, held the remainder, and caressed the trigger with practiced precision. The Chaytak roared, its distinctive report echoing across the canyon. The recoil flowed through Morgan's perfectly positioned body like water, finding the path of least resistance. 2.5 seconds later, the PKM gunner crumpled his weapon, falling silent. Without waiting for confirmation, Morgan cycled the bolt and acquired her next target. A spotter with thermal imaging equipment directing fire against the trapped SEAL team. "Wind shift, 1 minute right," Old Eagle advised. Another shot, another hit. Morgan keyed the radio set to the emergency frequency. Paladin active, providing cover. Below, she could see the sudden change in the SEAL team's posture, the recognition that someone was watching over them, the renewed determination as they began to coordinate their movement. For the first time in 2 years, Morgan felt the weight lifting from her shoulders. This was who she was, not just a killer, a guardian, someone who stood between good people and death. As she lined up her third shot, Old Eagle spoke quietly beside her. "Welcome back, Paladin. Time collapsed into a singular focus for Morgan Reynolds as she worked the bolt of her ShaTac M200 intervention. Each motion precise, economical, born from thousands of hours of practice and combat experience. The familiar weight of the rifle pressed against her shoulder, an extension of herself she had denied for 2 long years. 3 seconds between shots. 3 seconds to acquire a target, calculate adjustments, and execute. 3 seconds that meant life or death for the men trapped below. "Command element at your 2 o'clock, Old Eagle," said his voice, a calm anchor beside her. "Coordinating the flank attack." Morgan shifted her aim without hesitation. Through her scope, she could see a figure gesturing to others, directing the assault on the pinned SEAL team. The enemy commander wore tactical gear, several grades above standard insurgent equipment. Night vision, body armor, communications equipment that suggested military training. She made minute adjustments for wind and elevation. Inhale, half exhale, hold. The ShaTac bucked against her shoulder. 2.6 seconds later, the commander dropped. "Confirmed," Old Eagle said, watching through his spotter scope. "They're scattering, no clear leadership." Morgan cycled the bolt again, scanning for her next target. This wasn't about killing. This was battlefield psychology. Remove the command structure. Eliminate tactical advantages. Create confusion. Give the trapped team below precious seconds to regroup and counter. Lieutenant Commander Reeves had never heard a sound so beautiful as the crack of that unseen rifle. Each shot rang with surgical precision, dropping hostiles who had seemed untouchable moments before. His team had been seconds from being overrun. Now they had a chance. "Who the hell is Paladin?" Petty Officer Daniels asked, pressing a field dressing against his bleeding shoulder. "A ghost story," Reeves replied, checking his ammunition. "They say she was part of a Black Ops sniper unit. Disappeared after some classified mission went south in Afghanistan." "She?" Reeves nodded. The voice on the radio was female. "And if it's really Paladin," he paused, his expression grave. "She once held off 60 insurgents for 22 hours straight, alone." Above them on the ridge, Morgan maintained her methodical pace. Each shot calculated. Each target selected for maximum psychological impact. Not just removing threats, but demoralizing the entire enemy force. "They're pulling back from the southern approach," Old Eagle reported. "SEAL team is consolidating." Morgan lined up her sixth shot, a gunner setting up a mortar position that would devastate the SEALs if allowed to complete his setup. Range 2, 683 meters. Wind gusting to 14 miles per hour. She compensated, tracking the subtle movements of vegetation across the canyon, reading air currents invisible to the naked eye. The ShaTac roared. The mortar operator collapsed before he could fire a single round. "How many confirmed?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. 6 critical threats neutralized, 4 wounded but still in play. Morgan chambered another round. "Not enough. They need an extraction corridor." She keyed her radio. "Paladin to SEAL element. Preparing south extraction corridor. Stand by." Below, Reeves acknowledged the transmission. His men gathered the wounded, preparing to move the moment the corridor was secure. Through his tactical scope, he watched as hostile forces began retreating from the southern ridgeline, driven back by the precision fire from their unseen guardian. "Who would have thought?" Daniels murmured, wincing, as he checked his weapon one-handed. Saved by a ghost. Morgan shifted position slightly, adjusting for muscle fatigue that might affect her accuracy. After 2 years away from combat operations, her body was remembering quickly, but she knew her limits. 3 more shots before she would need to reset her position. "Target cluster at the choke point," Old Eagle directed. 3 hostiles setting up a blocking position. She sighted the first one, exhaled, fired. Before the first target hit the ground, she was already cycling the bolt, acquiring the second. The rhythm of combat sniper work returning with fluid familiarity. Breathe, adjust, fire. The third hostile broke and ran rather than hold position. "Smart man," Old Eagle commented dryly. Morgan scanned the battlefield, assessing the changing tactical situation. "SEAL team is mobile, moving toward extraction point. Hostile elements regrouping on the eastern ridge," Old Eagle warned. "Possible reinforcements." Morgan adjusted her position, settling into a more sustainable stance. This operation was far from over. "How many hostiles remaining?" "At least 15, maybe more in the gullies." She nodded grimly. "And the SEAL team, moving well. 2 being carried, the rest under their own power." Morgan keyed her radio again. "Paladin to SEAL element. Be advised, hostile reinforcements approaching from the east. Recommend expedited withdrawal." Lieutenant Commander Reeves acknowledged, directing his team to increase pace toward the extraction corridor Morgan had created. The wounded were struggling but alive. Against all odds, they might actually survive this ambush. As the SEAL team made their way towards safety, Morgan continued her methodical work. Each shot created space. Each impact bought seconds. The mathematics of survival calculated in brass and lead. 78 minutes after Morgan fired her first shot, SEAL Team 12 reached the designated extraction point. Of the 23 men who had entered the canyon, 21 were leaving alive. 2 would return in body bags. A painful loss, but far better than the total annihilation that had seemed inevitable before Paladin's intervention. Reeves looked up toward the western ridge, knowing their guardian angel was somewhere up there watching through her scope. He raised a hand in silent salute before leading his team to the emergency evacuation vehicles that had finally arrived. On the ridge, Morgan watched them depart through her scope. The familiar knot in her stomach loosened slightly. Not everyone had made it out, but most had. Better odds than her last operation. "We should move," she said, already breaking down her rifle with practiced efficiency. "Someone will come looking for the shooter." Old Eagle nodded, packing away the spotting equipment. "Base will be wondering where we are, too." Morgan paused, her hands suddenly still on the disassembled rifle. "Blackwood." He looked up at the rare use of his name. "Thank you," she said simply, "for the assist." The older man nodded, understanding the weight behind those simple words. "We did good work today, Paladin." She closed the rifle case with a decisive click. Morgan, just Morgan. The return journey to Redstone was taken at a less frantic pace. Both operators scanned their surroundings with professional paranoia, alert for any signs of pursuit or observation. The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty Jeep as it navigated the back roads away from Red Canyon. "We need to establish what happened out there," Morgan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "That wasn't a training exercise gone wrong." Old Eagle nodded. "Professional ambush, high-end equipment, tactical formations. Someone knew exactly where that SEAL team would be, which means either a very sophisticated enemy intelligence operation or someone on our side gave them up," Old Eagle finished grimly. Morgan looked out at the passing landscape, her mind working through scenarios with the same methodical precision she applied to shooting. "I need access to the mission briefing. Find out what they were doing in Red Canyon." "That won't be easy. SEAL operations are compartmentalized." "I still have contacts." Old Eagle glanced at her. "Thought you cut all those ties when you buried Paladin." Morgan's expression remained neutral behind her aviators. "Some things you can't walk away from completely." The Jeep rounded a bend, bringing Redstone Training Facility back into view. The sprawling complex of buildings and training ranges looked peaceful in the afternoon light. No indication of the life and death drama that had played out 23 miles away. "We need a cover story," Morgan said, "for where we've been." Old Eagle shrugged. "Rifle testing at the North Range. I signed out a vehicle this morning for that purpose." "And the shots fired?" "Long-range accuracy evaluations, scheduled and approved last week." Morgan nodded appreciatively. "You planned for this possibility." "I've been watching you for 2 years, Morgan, waiting for Paladin to resurface." Old Eagle navigated the Jeep toward a service entrance. Some people aren't meant to retire their skills, not when those skills can save lives. As they approached the gate, Morgan noticed increased activity around the base. Additional security personnel, communications vehicles deployed, the unmistakable signs of a facility responding to a crisis. "They know something happened," she murmured. "Stay calm. Follow my lead." The guard at the checkpoint looked tense, checking their IDs with more scrutiny than usual. "Master Sergeant Blackwood, Miss Reynolds, you've been off base for several hours." Old Eagle nodded casually. "North Range testing, new barrel harmonics evaluation." The guard frowned. "Sir, the base has been under Security Protocol 3 since 1100 hours. All personnel were recalled." "We were outside radio contact," Morgan interjected smoothly. "Deep in the North Canyon terrain, what happened?" "SEAL Team 12 was ambushed during training exercises. Details are classified." The guard waved them through. "Report to your stations immediately." As they drove toward the armory, Old Eagle and Morgan exchanged glances. The official story was already being constructed. Training exercise gone wrong. Nothing about professional attackers with military-grade equipment on American soil. "They're covering it up," Morgan said quietly. "Question is why?" They parked near the armory's service entrance, transferring the rifle case and equipment with casual efficiency. Nothing that would draw attention. Just a weapons technician and an instructor returning from routine testing. "I need to secure this," Morgan said, indicating the rifle case. "Then we need to talk. Privately." Old Eagle nodded. "My quarters, 1 hour." As they separated, Morgan made her way through the facility, noting the heightened security presence. Additional armed personnel at key junctions, restricted access to communication centers. Something bigger than a training accident was underway. In her workshop, Morgan secured the Chaytak in its hidden compartment, erasing all evidence of its recent use. She then resumed her normal duties, maintaining the facility's weapons with the same focused attention she always displayed. To any observer, she was simply Morgan Reynolds' dedicated weapons technician. Nothing more. 1 hour later, she made her way to Old Eagle's quarters, taking an indirect route that avoided the main security cameras. A habit from her previous life that she had never abandoned. Never enter or exit a location by the same path. Always be aware of observation points. Trust no one completely. Old Eagle's quarters reflected the man himself. Spartan but comfortable. Military efficiency softened by small personal touches. A vintage Colt 1911 displayed in a glass case. Photographs of long-ago operations, faces blurred to protect identities. Books on military history and strategy lining the walls. He opened the door before she could knock. "Come in, quickly." Inside, Morgan noticed a police scanner and multiple tablets displaying security feeds from around the base. Old Eagle had been busy. "What have you learned?" she asked, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. SEAL Team 12 was officially conducting routine training exercises in Red Canyon. Unofficially, they were tracking an unidentified surveillance drone that violated restricted airspace yesterday. Morgan frowned. Sophisticated drone capabilities would explain the ambush. They were lured there. Exactly. Old Eagle pulled up a satellite image on one of the tablets. The team reported the drone heading into Red Canyon. Then all communications went dark until they called for emergency extraction. Who authorized the pursuit? That's where it gets interesting. Old Eagle leaned forward. Direct order from Central Command, specifically from Colonel Anthony Williams. Morgan went completely still. The name struck her like a physical blow. "Williams, he's involved in this." "You know him." Her jaw tightened. "He was operational oversight for Chimera, Afghanistan, Operation Sandstorm." Old Eagle's expression darkened. "The mission where you lost your team." "The mission where my team was sent to die," Morgan corrected, her voice suddenly a cold. "We were given faulty intelligence, walked right into a trap, just like SEAL Team 12 today." The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Not coincidence. Connection. "Williams was promoted after Afghanistan," Morgan continued. "Despite the mission failure, despite losing an entire elite unit, he's now at the Pentagon directing special operations throughout the Middle East. And apparently operations here at home, too." Old Eagle pulled up another file. "Williams is scheduled to visit Redstone next week, routine inspection." Morgan set down her coffee cup with deliberate control. "There's nothing routine about this." Before Old Eagle could respond, a sharp knock came at the door. Both operators tensed, years of training, triggering instant alert status. Old Eagle motioned for Morgan to move to the blind spot beside the door, then opened it partially. Captain Mitchell stood in the hallway, his expression grim. "Blackwood, we need to talk." Old Eagle maintained his calm demeanor. "Can it wait, Captain? I was about to hit the shower." "It's about the incident today, SEAL Team 12. Mitchell's voice lowered, and the mysterious sniper support they reported receiving. Morgan remained perfectly still in her position, mentally calculating routes of escape, weapons within reach, scenarios for containment. "Best come in then," Old Eagle said, stepping aside. Mitchell entered, immediately spotting Morgan. His eyes narrowed. "Ms. Reynolds, interesting company you're keeping." "Maintenance consultation," she replied evenly. The Barrett rifles were showing inconsistent grouping during this morning's demonstration. Mitchell's gaze swept the room, taking in the security feeds, the satellite images still displayed on the tablets. "Doesn't look like rifle maintenance to me." Old Eagle closed the door. "What can we do for you, Captain?" Mitchell studied them both, his professional assessment evident in his gaze. SEAL Team 12 reports they were saved by long-range sniper support, shots fired from nearly 3,000 meters, perfect accuracy under complex wind conditions. He focused on Morgan. "The kind of shooting that's practically impossible, unless you're someone special." "I fix rifles, Captain. I don't fire them." "Do you?" Mitchell moved closer, his voice dropping. "Because Lieutenant Commander Reeves reported their guardian angel used the call sign Paladin, a name I've only heard in whispers. A sniper so good she's considered a myth in most circles." Morgan maintained her neutral expression, saying nothing. "Here's what interests me," Mitchell continued. "You and Blackwood were conveniently absent during the blank time frame when SEAL Team 12 was engaged. Your vehicle was logged leaving through the north gate at 0842. The first long-range support shot was fired at 0921. Old Eagle stepped forward. "We were conducting barrel harmonics tests as authorized. Check the logs." "I did." Mitchell's gaze never left Morgan. What I can't figure out is how a base weapons technician would have access to a weapon capable of consistent accuracy at nearly 3 kilometers, or the skills to use it. The tension in the room thickened. Morgan recognized the moment for what it was. Discovery. The careful identity she had constructed was unraveling. 2 years of anonymity potentially destroyed in a single afternoon. But before she could formulate a response, Mitchell did something unexpected. He smiled. Relax, both of you. I'm not here to expose anyone. Old Eagle frowned. Then why are you here, Captain? Mitchell moved to the window, checking outside before pulling the blinds closed. Because SEAL Team 12 included my brother Jason. He was one of the wounded. The doctors say he'll recover thanks to their mysterious guardian angel. He turned back to face them. I want to know what really happened out there. Not the official story about a training exercise gone wrong, the truth. Morgan exchanged a glance with Old Eagle, a silent communication between professionals weighing risks and options. Then she removed her aviators, revealing her gray eyes with their unusual focus and clarity. The truth, Captain, is complicated. I've got time. Morgan gestured to the satellite images on the tablet. SEAL Team 12 was set up. The drone incursion was bait. They were led directly into a prepared ambush position. By whom? That's what we're trying to determine, but we have reason to believe it connects to a previous operation. Afghanistan 2009, codename Sandstorm. Mitchell's expression changed. Sandstorm, the mission where an entire special operations unit was lost to Chimera. Morgan's gaze hardened. Not the entire unit. Understanding dawned on Mitchell's face as he looked at her with new recognition. You were there. I was Chimera's primary sniper support. Call sign Paladin. Mitchell lowered himself into a chair, processing the revelation. The records state the entire unit was killed in action. Official records don't always reflect reality, Captain, Old Eagle interjected, especially when powerful people have reasons to alter them. People like Colonel Williams, Mitchell asked. Morgan tensed again. How do you know that name? My brother talked about him, said Williams personally authorized the drone pursuit mission, insisted it was critical despite the risks. Mitchell leaned forward. What's the connection to Sandstorm? Morgan moved to the tablets, pulling up classified files that she shouldn't have had access to. Her fingers flew across the screen, navigating through layers of security with practiced ease. Operation Sandstorm, Afghanistan 2009. Chimera unit deployed to capture a high-value target in the Korangal Valley. Images appeared on screen. Tactical maps. Operation parameters. Intelligence indicated minimal resistance. Instead, we found a prepared enemy force with advanced knowledge of our approach vectors, team composition, and mission objectives. An ambush, Mitchell said quietly. Morgan nodded. 6 hours into the firefight, we called for emergency extraction. Request denied by Operational Command, specifically by Colonel Williams. He ordered us to continue the mission despite overwhelming evidence it was compromised. Old Eagle picked up the narrative. 8 operators entered that valley. 7 died. Morgan held position for 22 hours, providing cover fire while her team was systematically eliminated. Mitchell studied Morgan with new respect. How did you survive? Luck, she said flatly, and a willingness to disobey direct orders when those orders would result in certain death. She pulled up another file, a military service record. Colonel Anthony Williams, decorated career officer with rapid advancement through the ranks. After Sandstorm, Williams should have faced an inquiry. Instead, he received a promotion. The official report classified the mission as a training exercise gone wrong. Sound familiar? Mitchell stood pacing the small room. You think Williams deliberately sent my brother's team into an ambush? Why? That's what we need to find out. Morgan closed the files. But first we need to understand what's at stake. Why risk exposing a domestic operation on American soil? Old Eagle turned to Mitchell. Your brother, what exactly did SEAL Team 12 see before the ambush? Did they identify the drone? Mitchell shook his head. Jason didn't say, just that it was advanced, beyond anything commercially available. Morgan's mind worked through the possibilities. Military prototype foreign technology. Or something else entirely, Old Eagle suggested. Something worth killing to protect. The 3 operators fell silent, each considering the implications. A deliberate ambush of an elite SEAL team on American soil. Potential connections to a disastrous Afghanistan operation years earlier. A high-ranking military officer potentially involved in both. This goes beyond a simple betrayal, Morgan said finally. Williams is scheduled to visit Redstone next week. Whatever he's planning, whatever he's protecting, it's still in play. Mitchell nodded grimly. What do you need from me? Access to the SEAL Team 12 mission briefing. Complete unredacted. That won't be easy. Neither is surviving an ambush designed to leave no witnesses, Morgan countered. Your brother was lucky. My team wasn't. Mitchell considered his options. I can try, but it will take time. Time we may not have, Old Eagle warned. If Williams suspects anyone is connecting these dots, then we need insurance, Morgan concluded. Something that protects us if this goes sideways. What did you have in mind? Mitchell asked. Morgan turned to Old Eagle. The old protocols, pre-digital, hard copy contingencies. The older operator nodded in understanding. The insurance file. I haven't accessed that system in years, but it should still be active. Mitchell looked between them. What are you talking about? Before everything went digital, before operations were stored on network systems, we had other methods of securing critical information, Old Eagle explained. Physical records stored in secure locations accessible only to those with direct knowledge of their existence. Old school tradecraft, Morgan added. Something men like Williams wouldn't think to look for in the age of computers and cloud storage. And you believe there's a file on Operation Sandstorm in this system, Mitchell asked. Old Eagle exchanged a meaningful look with Morgan. Not just Sandstorm, every operation I've ever been associated with, including some that technically never happened. The implications were clear. Decades of classified operations, covert missions across multiple continents, actions officially disavowed but meticulously documented by operators who understood the value of insurance against betrayal. Where is this system? Mitchell pressed. Not here at Redstone, Old Eagle replied. Security through obscurity. The records are stored at multiple locations, fragmented coded requiring specific knowledge to reassemble. Morgan checked her watch. We have approximately 36 hours before base security protocols return to normal levels. We need to move now while the focus is still on Red Canyon. What's our first step? Mitchell asked. You return to your duties, Morgan directed. Maintain normal patterns. See what you can learn about the SEAL Team 12 briefing, but do nothing that would attract attention. And you two, Old Eagle stood. We're going hunting for ghosts. As darkness fell over Redstone, Morgan and Old Eagle prepared for their covert operation. They moved through the facility with natural confidence, their behavior indistinguishable from their normal routines. Morgan performed her evening weapon maintenance duties. Old Eagle conducted his standard instructor review session. Nothing to suggest anything unusual was underway. Only when the majority of personnel had retired for the evening did they begin their real work. Morgan changed into dark tactical clothing, practical but non-military in appearance. Civilian hiking boots, charcoal pants with reinforced knees and multiple pockets, a lightweight black jacket over a fitted base layer. Nothing that would identify her as military if observed. Nothing that would connect back to Redstone if compromised. She secured a small pack with essential gear. Compact binoculars, lock-picking set disguised as common tools, protein bars, water, burner phone with battery removed, a civilian model 9mm pistol with the serial number carefully obscured, equipment selected for deniability and utility. Old Eagle prepared in similar fashion, adding items from his personal collection, an old compass, paper maps yellowed with age, a leather-bound notebook filled with handwritten codes and coordinates, relics from an era of espionage that predated digital surveillance. They met at the facility's rarely used Eastern Maintenance Gate at precisely 2300 hours. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Two professionals executing a mission with practice coordination. Old Eagle drove them off base in an unmarked civilian vehicle, registered to a non-existent person at an address that would lead nowhere. Standard tradecraft for operations requiring complete deniability. The night enveloped them as they headed away from Redstone, away from the scrutiny of security cameras and routine patrols. 2 hours later, they arrived at an innocuous self-storage facility in a small town 40 miles from the base. Nothing about the location suggested significance. A generic business with minimal security. The perfect hiding place for secrets meant to stay buried. Unit 237, Old Eagle said, consulting his leather notebook. Changed the lock last year during routine maintenance. Morgan nodded, surveying the surroundings with professional caution. No obvious surveillance. No suspicious vehicles. The night manager half asleep in his office, attention fixed on a small television. They proceeded to the unit, Old Eagle producing a key from a hidden pocket. The padlock opened with a soft click. Inside the storage unit contained what appeared to be ordinary household items. Furniture draped with dust covers, cardboard boxes labeled with mundane contents, a stack of old magazines. Nothing to attract interest from casual observation. Old Eagle moved directly to an old filing cabinet in the corner. His fingers found a hidden latch beneath the bottom drawer. A soft click and a false panel swung open, revealing a small safe embedded in the concrete floor. Old school, Morgan commented appreciatively. Sometimes the simplest methods are the most secure. Old Eagle knelt, entering a complex combination from memory. The safe opened to reveal a collection of microfilm canisters, each labeled with a simple alphanumeric code. Sandstorm would be under operational designation SC70293, he said, rifling through the canisters. Ah, here. He held up a small metal container, unremarkable, except to those who understood its significance. Inside would be complete operational details of the Chimera mission, unredacted, unaltered, including the truth about what really happened in that Afghan valley. Morgan took the canister, weighing it in her hand. We need a reader. Already arranged. Old Eagle secured the safe and replaced the false panel. Contact of mine in Arlington, former agency technical services, maintains equipment specifically for this purpose. Arlington, that's close to the Pentagon. Old Eagle nodded grimly. Exactly, we're taking the fight to Williams' doorstep. As they prepared to leave, Morgan paused, her instincts suddenly alert. She motioned for silence, her body tensing as she focused on sounds beyond the storage unit. Footsteps, too deliberate to be casual, too measured to be innocent. Old Eagle recognized her reaction immediately, his own senses heightening. He gestured toward the rear of the unit, where a narrow maintenance access provided an alternative exit. Morgan moved silently, drawing her 9mm and checking the load. Old Eagle followed, securing the microfilm canister in a hidden pocket. They slipped through the maintenance access just as voices became audible from the main corridor. Unit 237, open it. Professional voices, military cadence, not local law enforcement. Morgan and Old Eagle navigated the narrow maintenance corridor, emerging behind the storage facility near a drainage ditch that offered concealment. They moved with practiced stealth, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers without betraying their position. Williams moved faster than we anticipated, Morgan whispered, as they reached the tree line beyond the facility. He's been planning this for years, Old Eagle replied, since Afghanistan, maybe longer. They watched from cover as armed men in civilian clothing, but with unmistakable military bearing, secured the storage facility. A black SUV with government plates waited nearby. Tactical team deployed for asset recovery. Our vehicle is compromised, Morgan assessed, and they'll have the roads covered. Old Eagle nodded. Alternative extraction plan, 3 miles east, old logging road. Without another word, they disappeared into the darkness. Two ghosts moving through the night with the practiced efficiency that had kept them alive through countless operations. The hunt for truth had become a fight for survival. Hours later, they arrived at a small cabin deep in the woods, accessible only by a barely visible trail. The structure appeared abandoned, weathered by years of neglect, perfect camouflage for a safe house maintained off official records. Inside the cabin revealed its true purpose. Communications equipment disguised as outdated electronics, weapons concealed within ordinary furniture, provisions stored in hidden compartments. A refuge designed by professionals for professionals. Arlington contact confirms he can meet us tomorrow night, Old Eagle said, checking a secured message on specialized equipment. But we'll need to alter our approach. Williams has activated surveillance protocols on all major routes. Morgan studied a topographical map spread across the cabin's table. Alternative pathways here and here. She traced routes that avoided main roads and potential checkpoints. We'll need different transportation. Already arranged. Old Eagle indicated a set of keys hanging by the door. Motorcycle in the shed out back, registered to a deceased fisherman from Maine, invisible to standard checks. Morgan nodded appreciatively. Old Eagle's preparation was thorough, reflecting decades of experience in covert operations. The kind of expertise that couldn't be taught in training facilities or learned from manuals. As dawn approached, Morgan stood by the cabin's window, watching the forest with vigilant eyes. Her mind replayed the events that had led to this moment. The ambush at Red Canyon, the connections to Operation Sandstorm, the betrayal that had cost her team their lives. You should rest, Old Eagle suggested, joining her at the window. Long day ahead. I'll rest when Williams answers for what he did. Old Eagle studied her profile, noting the tension in her jaw, the focused determination in her eyes. Revenge won't bring them back, Morgan. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice and prevention. She turned to face him. Williams sacrificed my team. He nearly did the same to SEAL Team 12. How many more operators will die if he isn't stopped? The older man nodded slowly. Fair point. Why did you help me today? Morgan asked suddenly. You could have reported the transmission, followed protocols. Instead, you risked your career, your freedom. Why, Old Eagle was silent for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful in the dim light. Because some oaths matter more than others. The oath to never leave a comrade behind. The oath to stand against betrayal even when it comes from within our own ranks. He moved to a small cabinet, retrieving an old photograph protected in plastic. And because I made a promise long ago. The photograph showed two young operators in desert camouflage arms around each other's shoulders. One was unmistakably a younger William Blackwood. The other, my father, Morgan whispered, recognizing Alan Reynolds despite never having seen this particular image. Old Eagle nodded. Your father saved my life in Grenada. His last words to me were about you. Watch over my little girl, Bill. Make sure she finds her way. Morgan took the photograph, studying it with new understanding. You knew who I was the moment I arrived at Redstone. I've known about you much longer than that. Followed your career from a distance. When you disappeared after Afghanistan, I pulled strings to make sure you had a place at Redstone if you wanted it. Why didn't you tell me? Some truths need to be discovered, not told. Old Eagle took back the photograph, securing it carefully. Your father was the finest man I ever served with. He would be proud of who you've become, even the parts you've tried to leave behind. Morgan felt something shift within her. The weight she'd carried since Afghanistan, somehow lighter, shared with someone who understood. Not just the burden of survival, but the responsibility that came with their unique skills. Get some rest, Old Eagle said again. Tomorrow we take the fight to Williams. This time Morgan nodded, moving to the small cot in the corner of the cabin. As she lay down, her mind continued processing, planning, calculating odds and contingencies. But beneath the tactical considerations, a new resolve was forming. Paladin wasn't just a call sign from her past. It was a mantle of protection, a shield for those who couldn't defend themselves against betrayal from within. Perhaps it was time to reclaim that purpose, not just for a single desperate mission, but for the battles yet to come. As sleep finally claimed her, Morgan's last conscious thought was of the 21 SEAL operators who had survived because she had broken her vow. 21 lives saved by skills she had tried to bury. 21 reasons to become Paladin once more. The world awakens differently for those who live in the shadows. For Morgan Reynolds, consciousness returned with immediate situational awareness. Location, security status, available weapons, exits. The ingrained habits of a lifetime spent in environments where inattention meant death. The cabin remained secure. First light filtered through camouflage windows. Old Eagle was already awake, monitoring communications equipment disguised as outdated ham radio gear. His weathered fingers adjusted frequencies with practiced precision expression, impassive as he tracked encrypted channels. Sleep well, he asked without looking up. Morgan rose from the cot, stretching muscles that remembered yesterday's long-range shooting position. Well enough. Updates. Williams has mobilized resources, multiple search patterns across 3 counties, officially listed as a training exercise. Of course it is, Morgan replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. How close are they? Main search grid is still focused on areas east of the storage facility. They haven't identified the sector yet. Old Eagle handed her a steaming cup of coffee. But they will. Williams is thorough. Morgan accepted the coffee, mind already calculating timeframes and options. Contact in Arlington still secure. For now, but we needs to move soon. Motorcycle is prepped. Old Eagle gestured to a worn backpack on the table. Essentials only. Everything else stays here. She nodded, understanding the tactical necessities. Travel light, leave no evidence. Create no pattern. The microfilm canister with the sandstorm operation details represented their only leverage against Williams, their only chance to expose the truth. While preparing for departure, Morgan's burner phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number written in the specialized code she and Captain Mitchell had established before separating. Mitchell has secured the SEAL Team 12 briefing. She reported, decoding the message. Confirms Williams personally authorized the mission. Drone was identified as prototype surveillance technology. No manufacturer markings. Old Eagle frowned. Black project. Likely. Mitchell also reports Williams has moved up his inspection visit to Redstone, arriving tomorrow instead of next week. He's accelerating his timeline. Whatever he's planning, our actions have forced his hand. Morgan pocketed the phone. Good, reactive opponents make mistakes. They departed the cabin 30 minutes later, leaving no trace of their presence. The motorcycle provided the maneuverability and access to terrain denied to larger vehicles. Morgan drove while Old Eagle navigated their route, deliberately avoiding main roads, security cameras, and potential checkpoints. 4 hours of careful travel brought them to the outskirts of Arlington, Virginia. They abandoned the motorcycle in long-term airport parking, switching to public transportation using cash and false identification. Counter-surveillance procedures executed with the fluid precision of operators who had survived decades in the intelligence community. Their contact waited in a modest apartment above a used bookstore. Samuel Weiss, 70 years old, former technical services specialist with an intelligence agency he still refused to name specifically. A man whose existence had been carefully erased from official records upon retirement, but whose skills remained undiminished by time. William Blackwood, Weiss greeted Old Eagle with a firm handshake. Been a long time. Not long enough if they're still hunting us, Sam. Weiss turned to Morgan, assessing her with experienced eyes. This must be Paladin. Your reputation precedes you. Morgan maintained her professional mask. Just Morgan is fine. No such thing as just anything in our world. Weiss secured multiple locks on the apartment door, especially not when you've angered someone like Anthony Williams. The apartment interior belied its modest exterior. Advanced security systems monitored approaches from all directions. Specialized equipment filled a back room, converted into a technical workshop. The living space combined functional efficiency with the comfortable touches of a man who appreciated the small luxuries denied during years of operational deployment. Weiss gestured toward his workshop. Let's see what you've brought me. Old Eagle produced the microfilm canister, handling it with reverence. Operation Sandstorm, complete operational details. Ah, the old insurance files. Weiss accepted the canister with a knowing smile. Analog backup in a digital world. Clever then. Brilliant now. He moved to a workstation dominated by what appeared to be outdated equipment. A specialized microfilm reader, modified with digital scanning capabilities, connected to a computer system isolated from any network. Weiss worked with practiced efficiency loading the film and calibrating the system. This will take some time, he explained. The encryption on these files requires specialized processing. Make yourselves comfortable. As Weiss worked, Morgan positioned herself near a window, maintaining surveillance on the street below while staying hidden from external view. Old Eagle checked his secure communications device, monitoring the search patterns, still focusing on areas miles from their current location. Williams is getting desperate, he observed, deploying additional resources, using official channels to classify us as armed and dangerous persons of interest. Morgan nodded grimly. He knows what we have, which means he knows what it proves. The implications hung between them. Evidence of treason, of an American colonel deliberately sacrificing elite operators for unknown purposes. The kind of revelation that would shatter military command structures and undermine public trust in institutions already strained by decades of controversial deployments. An hour passed before Weiss called them to his workstation. The microfilm had been digitized, its contents displayed across multiple screens. Operation plans, personnel files, intelligence assessments, communication logs, the complete operational record of Chimera's doomed mission in Afghanistan. It's all here, Weiss confirmed, including communications that never made it into the official record. Morgan leaned forward, studying the screens with intense focus. Details she had never been privy to as Chimera's sniper support. Intelligence assessments contradicting the mission parameters they had been given. Risk evaluations indicating high probability of compromise. Communications from field assets warning of unusual enemy activity in the target area. All of it ignored. All of it overridden by one name, Colonel Anthony Williams. He knew, Morgan whispered, the cold certainty settling in her chest. He knew the mission was compromised before we ever deployed. Old Eagle pointed to a particularly damning communication exchange. Not just knew, he engineered it. Look at this transmission. Williams personally modified the insertion coordinates, placing your team directly in the enemy's strongest position. Morgan read the document, her professional detachment threatening to crack under the weight of revelation. 7 operators, 7 friends, sent to die not through error or miscalculation, but by deliberate action. Why, she demanded, voice tight with controlled emotion. What possible reason could justify this? Weiss adjusted his glasses, bringing another document into focus. Perhaps this. Financial transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. Initiated 24 hours after Chimera deployment. $5 million from a shell corporation, later traced to arms manufacturers specializing in drone technology. The pieces aligned with terrible clarity. Not just betrayal for personal gain, but something more insidious. A pattern extending from Afghanistan to the present, from Chimera to SEAL Team 12. He's testing something, Old Eagle concluded, the veteran intelligence officer, connecting data points with practiced insight, using our operators as live targets to evaluate weapon systems. The drone SEAL Team 12 was sent to investigate, Morgan added. Not just surveillance, targeting capabilities, battlefield assessment. Weiss nodded grimly. Someone's developing next-generation combat drones, using American forces as unwitting test subjects. The revelation brought cold fury. Morgan had suspected betrayal, had lived with the knowledge that her team had been sacrificed. But this systematic exploitation of American operators as test targets against experimental weapons platforms transcended ordinary treason. We need to get this information to people who can act on it, she said. People Williams can't control or intimidate. Easier said than done, Weiss cautioned. Williams has connections throughout military and intelligence communities, friends in oversight committees, allies in executive branches. Old Eagle's expression hardened with resolve. Then we go above them all, directly to the public. Media, Morgan questioned. Too easy to discredit. They'll paint us as disgruntled operators with personal vendettas. Not media. Congressional testimony, under oath, with irrefutable evidence. Old Eagle tapped the screens displaying the Sandstorm files. This plus whatever Mitchell has secured from the SEAL Team 12 briefing, combined with surviving witnesses from both operations. The strategy took shape between them. Not just exposure, but accountability, enforced through constitutional mechanisms designed to check military overreach. A plan requiring precision timing, unassailable evidence, and the courage to stand publicly against a powerful opponent who had already demonstrated willingness to kill American operators. Williams arrives at Redstone tomorrow, Morgan said, thinking through the tactical implications. We need to be there when he does. Walking directly into his sphere of influence is exceptionally dangerous, Weiss warned. So is allowing him to continue sacrificing operators for profit, she countered. Old Eagle nodded in agreement. Redstone is where this ends, one way or another. Weiss sighed with the resignation of a man who had seen too many good operators undertake high-risk missions. Then let's prepare you properly. The next hours were devoted to meticulous preparation. Weiss created secure digital copies of the Sandstorm files encrypted with multiple redundancies in deadman switches, ensuring the information would release automatically if they failed to input specific codes at designated intervals. Old Eagle coordinated with trusted contacts still active in military and intelligence communities. Former operators who understood the code of honor that transcended official regulations. Men and women who had lived by the creed that you never abandon your own, even when orders demanded otherwise. Morgan reached out to Mitchell through secure channels coordinating their convergence at Redstone. The captain had secured critical evidence from the SEAL Team 12 briefing, establishing the direct connection between Williams and the Red Canyon ambush. Together with the Sandstorm files, they now possessed the complete evidence chain linking Williams to both betrayals. As evening approached, Weiss provided them with updated equipment, secure communication devices, specialized recording technology designed to bypass standard countermeasures, weapons that would pass through military-based security protocols undetected. I've arranged transportation back to Redstone, Weiss said, handing Old Eagle a set of keys. Vehicle with diplomatic plates. Not entirely legal, but effective. Military checkpoints won't stop you. Morgan raised an eyebrow. Diplomatic connections, Sam. I'm impressed. The older technician smiled faintly. Retirement provides unexpected opportunities for relationship building. Before departing, Morgan studied the complete Sandstorm file one final time. The photographs of her Chimera teammates stared back from the screen. Michael Torres, communications specialist. Rebecca Chen, intelligence analyst. James Watkins, tactical lead. 4 others whose specialized skills had made Chimera the elite unit selected for only the most challenging operations. All dead because of Williams' betrayal. We'll make it right, she whispered a promise to ghosts who had haunted her for 2 years. As they prepared to leave, Weiss placed a hand on Morgan's shoulder. Paladin was a legend even in my circles. The operator who could make impossible shots. Who appeared when situations were hopeless and disappeared when the mission was complete. That was another life, Morgan replied. No. Weiss shook his head. That's who you are. The name changes nothing. They departed Arlington under cover of darkness, the diplomatic vehicle providing the protection of anonymity as they traveled toward Redstone. Morgan drove while Old Eagle maintained communications with their growing network of allies. The pieces were aligning, the trap for Williams taking form. Mitchell reports Williams will arrive at Redstone at 0800 tomorrow, Old Eagle said, checking a secured message. Full security detail, official inspection, cover story. Morgan nodded, processing the tactical implications. He'll expect us to avoid the base, to run as far from his influence as possible, which is precisely why we're returning. Where predators feel safest, they grow careless. Old Eagle studied her profile in the darkness, noting the focused determination that had replaced the emotional detachment of the weapons technician. You've made peace with being Paladin again. Not peace, Morgan corrected. Purpose. There's a difference. They arrived at a safe house 20 miles from Redstone shortly after midnight. Another location from Old Eagle's extensive network of unofficial resources, this one a hunting cabin registered to a retired sergeant major who understood the unwritten codes of the special operations community. Inside, they found Captain Mitchell waiting, his expression grave as he rose to meet them. Williams has accelerated his timeline, he reported without preamble. Not just the Redstone inspection, he's scheduled to meet with defense contractors tomorrow afternoon. Subject classified, but security protocols suggest weapons demonstration. Morgan and Old Eagle exchanged significant glances. The pattern continuing, another demonstration potentially using American operators as unwitting test subjects. Mitchell placed a secured tablet on the cabin's table. Complete SEAL Team 12 briefing, unredacted, drone specifications, operational parameters, Williams' personal authorization codes. Morgan activated the tablet, reviewing the information with professional assessment. This confirms everything. The drone SEAL Team 12 was sent to investigate matches technological specifications linked to the shell corporation that paid Williams after Afghanistan. Same players. Old Eagle confirmed. Same methodology, different victims. My brother says 3 other SEAL teams have been given similar missions in the past month, Mitchell added. Tracking unidentified aerial vehicles in remote training areas, all personally authorized by Williams. The implications were clear. Not isolated incidents. A systematic program using America's elite operators as live targets for weapons testing. We end this tomorrow, Morgan stated, the cold precision of Paladin evident in her voice. They spent the remaining hours finalizing their strategy. Not a direct confrontation which Williams would anticipate encounter with superior resources. Instead, an approach leveraging their understanding of bureaucratic vulnerabilities and military protocols, using Williams' own system against him. As dawn approached, Morgan stepped outside the cabin, watching the sky lighten with the promise of a clear day. Perfect conditions for the precision work ahead. Old Eagle joined her, his presence a solid reassurance born from decades of operational experience. You ready for this? He asked quietly. I've been ready since Afghanistan, just didn't know it. Old Eagle nodded, understanding the journey that had brought her to this moment. The path from elite sniper to withdrawn technician, and now to something new. Something combining the lethal skills of Paladin with the moral clarity forged through loss and betrayal. Your father faced a similar moment, he said, in Grenada, when orders conflicted with what he knew was right. Morgan looked at him with renewed interest. You never told me what really happened there. The official record states he died securing an extraction point for his team, which is true as far as it goes. Old Eagle gazed toward the horizon. What it doesn't mention is that the extraction wasn't authorized. That command had ordered them to continue the mission despite intelligence indicating civilian hostages would be killed in the process. So he disobeyed orders. He created a third option. Secured those civilians and his team at the cost of his own life. Old Eagle's voice carried the weight of memory. Some choices transcend regulations, Morgan. Some obligations run deeper than oaths to institutions. The parallel to their current situation hung unspoken between them. Another moment where duty to fellow operators outweighed official protocols, where the right action required standing against the very system they had sworn to serve. Williams represents everything my father stood against, Morgan said quietly. Everything Chimera died fighting. Then let's make sure their sacrifices mean something. They rejoined Mitchell inside the cabin, making final preparations for the operation ahead. Each operator assuming specific responsibilities according to their skills and positions. Mitchell would maintain his official role at Redstone, providing critical internal access and communications. Old Eagle would coordinate their network of allies, ensuring the evidence reached multiple secure destinations regardless of the operation's outcome. And Morgan would become Paladin once more. Not as a weapon this time, but as the precision instrument of justice her training had always intended her to be. They arrived at Redstone separately, maintaining operational security through compartmentalization. Mitchell resumed his normal duties, his command authority providing freedom of movement throughout the facility. Old Eagle returned to his instructor role, positioning himself to monitor Williams's inspection tour through legitimate channels. Morgan entered through the maintenance access point she had always used, invisible through familiarity. The weapons technician reporting for routine duties, unremarkable and overlooked. Perfect operational cover for what would follow. Colonel Anthony Williams arrived precisely at Burrow 800 hours, his motorcade passing through Redstone's main gate with the confidence of authority unquestioned. 4-vehicle security detail. Personal staff, military police escort, the full protocol befitting his rank and position. From her workshop, Morgan monitored his arrival through the facility's security feeds access, granted through encryption keys Mitchell had provided. Williams moved through Redstone like a man accustomed to deference. Tall, distinguished in his dress uniform, adorned with combat decorations and service medals. Silver hair perfectly groomed, posture military straight despite 30 years of service. The face of a patriot concealing the heart of a traitor. Williams' inspection tour proceeded according to standard protocols. Briefings from base commanders, reviews of training methodologies, assessments of equipment and readiness. The mundane theater of military bureaucracy masking the true purpose of his visit. At 1,000 hours, according to the intelligence Mitchell had secured, Williams would meet with his true objective at Redstone. Representatives from the defense contractor developing the drone technology tested against American operators. The next phase in a program that had already cost the lives of Morgan's Chimera teammates and nearly destroyed SEAL Team 12. The facility's conference center had been secured for this meeting. Access restricted to essential personnel. Communications monitored for unauthorized transmissions. Standard security measures for classified briefings familiar to anyone with military experience. But familiarity created blind spots. Assumptions about threats coming from outside rather than within. Weaknesses in protocols designed to control conventional risks while overlooking the danger posed by those who understood the system intimately. At 0930 hours, Morgan moved from her workshop to the maintenance access corridor adjacent to the conference center. Her tools and technician uniform providing perfect cover for her presence in restricted areas. No one questioned maintenance personnel. No one monitored their movements with the scrutiny applied to operational staff. She positioned specialized recording devices and ventilation systems overlooking the conference room. Technology provided by Weiss capable of capturing conversations despite countermeasure systems. Evidence gathering for what would follow. At 0945, Old Eagle initiated the second phase of their operation, a controlled security incident on the far side of the facility. Nothing threatening but significant enough to draw attention and resources away from the conference center. A distraction creating operational space for what would follow. By 0955, Morgan had positioned herself in the small technical observation booth overlooking the conference room. A space designed for audiovisual support during presentations, now repurposed as her operational center. Through one-way glass, she would witness Williams's meeting with the defense contractors, would secure the final evidence connecting him to the betrayal of American operators. At precisely 1,000 hours, Williams entered the conference room accompanied by 3 men in expensive suits. Corporate representatives arriving without the security protocols that would identify them in facility records. Another deviation from standard procedures, another indication of operations conducted beyond official oversight. Morgan activated the recording devices as Williams began speaking, his voice captured with perfect clarity by Weiss's technology. "Gentlemen, the field tests have exceeded expectations." Williams began his tone, that of a man discussing ordinary business rather than the deliberate targeting of American special operations teams. SEAL Team 12 provided excellent performance metrics for the targeting systems. One of the corporate representatives nodded in satisfaction. Survival rate, 21 of 23, better than projected. The system is learning to distinguish between primary targets and collateral personnel. The casual discussion of American operators as test subjects confirmed every suspicion, every element of betrayal Morgan had suspected since Afghanistan. The recording devices captured it all, transmitting to secure servers beyond Williams' reach or influence. What about the unexpected intervention? Another representative asked. Our monitoring systems detected long-range counterfire during the Red Canyon test. Williams frowned. An anomaly being investigated, possible security breach involving former operators with personal grievances. Paladin, the third representative said, surprising Morgan with his knowledge of her former call sign. That's what the SEAL team reported, correct, a legendary sniper thought to have been eliminated in Afghanistan. Legends are often exaggerated, Williams replied dismissively. But yes, that operational designation was used. Suggesting someone with knowledge of classified missions is interfering with our program. This presents complications for the next phase, the first representative observed. The Pentagon demonstration next week requires absolute security. Williams nodded with cold assurance. By then, all security anomalies will be resolved permanently. The implication was unmistakable. Williams intended to eliminate Morgan Old Eagle and anyone else with knowledge of his operations before the program advanced to its next phase. More American operators sacrificed as test targets for weapon systems being sold to the highest military bidders. Morgan had heard enough. The evidence was secured. The connection established between Williams, the defense contractors, and the deliberate targeting of American special operations teams. Everything needed to expose the conspiracy and bring those responsible to justice. She slipped from the observation booth as the meeting continued, transmitting a coded confirmation to Old Eagle and Mitchell. Phase 1 complete. Evidence secured. Moving to Phase 2. Phase 2 required precision timing. Coordination between multiple operators executing simultaneous actions across Redstone. A tactical operation against an enemy who controlled the very systems they were utilizing. At 10:30 hours, as Williams concluded his meeting with the defense contractors, the trap was sprung. Captain Mitchell, acting with his official authority, entered the conference room accompanied by military police officers whose loyalty had been verified through Old Eagle's networks. Not corrupted by Williams' influence. Not compromised by misplaced institutional loyalty. Colonel Anthony Williams, Mitchell announced formally, you are hereby detained pending investigation of treason against the United States and conspiracy resulting in the deaths of American military personnel. Williams' expression shifted from shock to calculating assessment. Captain, this is a serious breach of protocol. These proceedings are classified above your clearance level. Not anymore, sir. Mitchell gestured to the military police. These officers have been authorized by the Inspector General's office to secure you and all materials related to Operation Sandstorm and the recent SEAL Team 12 incident. Williams maintained his composure, the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to manipulating military bureaucracy. This is absurd. I have no knowledge of any operational connections between those incidents. Your career is over, Captain. Actually, Colonel, Morgan said, stepping into the conference room from a side entrance. We have extensive evidence proving otherwise. Williams focused on her, recognition dawning in his eyes. Not the weapons technician he had likely been briefed about. Not the anonymous maintenance staff he had dismissed throughout his career. But Paladin, the operator who had survived his betrayal in Afghanistan. Reynolds, he acknowledged ice in his voice. I should have confirmed your elimination personally. You made that mistake in Afghanistan. You made it again at Red Canyon. Morgan moved closer, professional rather than threatening. The difference is now we have proof of everything, the payments, the illegal weapons testing against American operators, all of it. Williams glanced toward the corporate representatives who had retreated to the far side of the conference room, their expressions betraying the calculations of men determining whether to abandon a compromised asset. You have nothing, Williams stated with forced confidence. Conspiracy theories and personal vendettas. Nothing that will stand up to military inquiry. Old Eagle entered the room, completing their triangle of accusation. We have the complete Sandstorm operational record, Colonel. The original files, not your redacted versions, including your direct orders placing Chimera in that kill box after receiving intelligence warning of enemy preparation. For the first time, Williams' composure cracked slightly. Impossible. Those records were sealed, destroyed. Some of us believe in insurance policies, Old Eagle replied, against the day when men like you betray everything the uniform stands for. The military police moved forward, securing Williams despite his protests. The corporate representatives were similarly detained. Their identities documented their connections to the illegal weapons program established through the evidence Morgan Old Eagle and Mitchell had assembled. As Williams was led from the conference room, he locked eyes with Morgan one final time. You think this ends here? There are systems in place, contingencies for exactly this scenario. Morgan met his gaze without emotion. So do we. Even as Williams was being processed through military justice protocols, the evidence of his crimes was being transmitted through secure channels established by Old Eagle's network, to congressional oversight committees, to trusted military commanders untainted by Williams's corruption, to carefully selected media outlets with reputations for rigorous fact-checking and source verification. The insurance policy Old Eagle had mentioned, guaranteeing that regardless of institutional resistance or attempted cover-ups, the truth would emerge. The betrayal would be exposed. The sacrifices of Chimera and the near destruction of SEAL Team 12 would not be hidden beneath classifications and security protocols. Hours later, as military investigators swarmed Redstone securing evidence and interviewing personnel, Morgan found herself back in her workshop. The familiar space felt different now. No longer a hiding place where she buried her skills and identity, no longer penance for failures that had never been her responsibility. Captain Mitchell found her there, his expression reflecting the complex mixture of vindication and solemn responsibility that came with exposing corruption within one's own ranks. Williams is being transported to secure military facilities in Washington, he reported. The defense contractors are similarly detained. Their corporate headquarters are being raided by federal authorities as we speak. Morgan nodded. And SEAL Team 12, debriefed, their testimonies added to the evidence file. Mitchell smiled slightly. My brother asked me to convey personal thanks to Paladin, said he always believed the legends were real. Not legends, just training and commitment. Morgan glanced around her workshop at the tools and equipment that had been both her disguise and her sanctuary. What happens now? That depends on you. The Inspector General's office has expressed interest in your expertise, both as a weapons specialist and as an operator with unique experience identifying insider threats. Morgan considered the offer implicit in Mitchell's statement, a return to operational status, a chance to use her skills officially rather than from the shadows, to prevent other betrayals before they claimed more lives. Before she could respond, Old Eagle appeared in the workshop doorway, his weathered face bearing the satisfied expression of a mission successfully completed. Thought I'd find you two here, he said. The Pentagon has officially suspended all programs connected to Williams pending full investigation. 3 other SEAL teams scheduled for similar training exercises have had their missions canceled. Lives saved, Morgan observed quietly. Because of what we did today, Old Eagle confirmed. What you did, Morgan. She shook her head slightly. What we did, all of us. Mitchell excused himself to coordinate with the ongoing investigation, leaving Morgan and Old Eagle alone in the workshop that had been her refuge for 2 years. They've offered you reinstatement, haven't they? Old Eagle asked once Mitchell had departed. Something like that? Morgan leaned against her workbench, suddenly weary from the emotional and physical demands of the past days. A chance to prevent other Williams types from betraying operators. And will you accept? She considered the question, carefully weighing options, with the same methodical assessment she applied to long-range shooting variables. Not as they envision it, she decided. Not returning to who I was before. Old Eagle nodded with understanding. Who then? Morgan looked around the workshop at the rifles she had maintained with such care. The equipment she had calibrated to perfection. The skills she had preserved even while denying their primary purpose. Someone new, she said finally. Someone who combines what I learned as Paladin with what I've become since. 1 week later, Morgan stood before a group of young operators gathered in Redstone's training facility. 20 men and women selected for specialized instruction not found in standard military curricula. The best from various special operations communities brought together for training that transcended conventional tactical doctrines. Morgan surveyed them with the experienced assessment of an operator who had seen both the heights of military excellence and the depths of institutional betrayal. Who had learned that true loyalty meant sometimes standing against the very systems you had sworn to serve when those systems were corrupted from within. Old Eagle stood beside her, his presence a reminder of the continuity between generations of operators. The passing of wisdom and experience that transcended official training, manuals, and bureaucratic structures. My name is Morgan Reynolds, she began addressing the assembled operators with quiet authority. Some of you may have heard rumors about recent events involving Colonel Williams and certain classified operations. Those rumors are probably incomplete, but the essential truth is this: systems can be corrupted. Chain of command can be compromised. And when that happens, the only defense is operators who remember their true loyalty is not to institutions, but to each other and the principles we claim to defend. She moved among them, making eye contact with each operator in turn. establishing the personal connection that distinguished true leadership from mere authority. The program you've entered isn't about creating better weapons or more lethal tactics. It's about developing operators who can recognize when something is wrong, who can identify betrayal from within as readily as threats from without, who understand that sometimes the most important shot you'll ever take isn't the one that eliminates an enemy, but the one that protects your fellow operators. Old Eagle stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. This program exists because of what happened to Chimera in Afghanistan and SEAL Team 12 here at home. Because good operators died when the system meant to support them was turned against them. Your training will ensure those sacrifices weren't meaningless. Over the weeks that followed, Morgan and Old Eagle developed their specialized curriculum. Not just advanced marksmanship and tactical operations, though those remained essential components, but also the critical thinking skills and ethical frameworks necessary to navigate the complex terrain where military necessity met moral imperative, where operators learned to distinguish between lawful orders and corrupt exploitation, between necessary secrecy and institutional cover-ups, between the discipline required for effective operations and the moral courage to stand against betrayal. They called it the Guardian Initiative, officially sanctioned, but operating at the edges of conventional military structures, creating operators capable of functioning both within the system and as its ultimate accountability mechanism. 6 months after Williams' arrest and the exposure of his illegal weapons testing program, Morgan found herself on Redstone's 1,000-yard range with her newest class of operators. The specialized training approaching its final phases, the selected personnel demonstrating both the tactical excellence and moral clarity the program demanded. As she observed their long-range shooting drills making adjustments to stance and breathing techniques, Old Eagle joined her at the observation position. "Brass is pleased with the program results," he reported. "3 Guardian graduates already identified potential irregularities in operations that warranted investigation." Morgan nodded with satisfaction. They're learning to see the patterns, to trust their instincts when something doesn't align with legitimate operational parameters. Just like you did. Old Eagle watched the shooters with professional assessment. Though none of them can match your range records yet, she allowed herself a small smile. Some skills take more than training. Speaking of which, Old Eagle handed her a tablet displaying a mission briefing. Request for Guardian support. Black operation in contested territory. Possible compromise at command level. Morgan reviewed the details with practiced efficiency. The situation familiar in its broad outlines. Operators potentially being placed at risk by commanders with questionable motivations or compromised loyalty. The kind of scenario where precision intervention might mean the difference between mission success and another Chimera tragedy. They're requesting Paladin specifically, Old Eagle noted. Your reputation has spread. Morgan considered the request, weighing responsibilities and capabilities with the same methodical assessment she applied to long-range ballistic calculations. The protective instinct that had always defined her operational philosophy now expanded beyond specific teams or missions to encompass the entire special operations community. "Tell them we'll deploy in 24 hours, she decided. "Full Guardian protocols." Old Eagle nodded with approval. "I'll coordinate support elements." As he departed to make arrangements, Morgan remained at the observation point, watching her students execute the precision shooting drills she had designed. Each shot representing not just technical mastery, but the ethical framework underlying the Guardian Initiative. The understanding that their skills existed not primarily to take lives, but to protect those who could not protect themselves, including their fellow operators betrayed by the very systems they served. Morgan lifted her binoculars, assessing a particularly promising student whose shooting discipline reminded her of her own early training. The focused determination, the natural alignment with weapon and environment, the potential to become something extraordinary in the right circumstances. In that moment, she recognized how completely her journey had come full circle. From Paladin, the lone operative, to Morgan, the withdrawn technician, and now to something new. Something that combined the lethal precision of her former identity with the protective purpose that had always been its true foundation. Not just a weapon, not just a shield, but a guardian in the fullest sense, standing watch against threats from without and corruption from within, using her unique skills not for personal redemption or institutional loyalty, but for the protection of those who stood on the front lines of American security. As the sun began to set over Redstone's ranges, Morgan made her final notations on student performance evaluations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Another mission requiring the specialized capabilities only she could provide. Another opportunity to ensure no more operators would be sacrificed to institutional corruption or personal gain. Old Eagle rejoined her as she prepared to conclude the day's training, his expression conveying the satisfaction of a mission well executed and a legacy secured. "You know," he said as they walked back toward the facility together, "your father once told me the true measure of any operator wasn't how many enemies they eliminated, but how many teammates they brought home." Morgan nodded, the wisdom resonating with her own evolved understanding. He was right. He would be proud of what you've built here, what you've become. She glanced back at the range where her students were securing their equipment, the next generation of Guardians preparing to carry forward the principles she had established. Operators who would stand as the last line of defense against betrayal from within their own ranks. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of absolute conviction. "There will always be more Williams types, more systems vulnerable to corruption, more operators at risk from the very institutions they serve. And there will always be paladins to stand against them," Old Eagle affirmed. Morgan nodded, accepting both the name and the responsibility it represented. Not as a burden now, but as a mantle willingly assumed. The precision shooter who had once disappeared into anonymous technical work, now fully embracing her unique capacity to protect those who protected others. As they reached the facility entrance, the security guards saluted with the respect due to instructors whose reputation had spread throughout Redstone. No longer just the quiet weapons technician and aging instructor, now recognized as the architects of a program redefining the relationship between operators and the systems they served. Morgan returned the salute with professional courtesy, then entered the facility that had evolved from her refuge to her operational center. Tomorrow would bring another mission, another opportunity to apply her extraordinary skills in defense of operators who might otherwise fall victim to institutional betrayal. For that was the true legacy of Paladin, not the impossible shots or battlefield legends, but the lives preserved when systems failed and only individual courage stood between good operators and betrayal from those they were sworn to trust. A legacy now secured not just through Morgan's personal actions, but through the guardians she was training to carry that vigilance forward, ensuring that what happened to Chimera in Afghanistan and nearly happened to SEAL Team 12 at Red Canyon would never again go unchallenged or unpunished. That was a purpose worthy of her skills, a mission that honored those who had fallen, a commitment that would define the remainder of her operational life. Morgan Reynolds, Paladin, Guardian, the operator who had learned that sometimes the most important shot wasn't the one that took a life, but the one that preserved it.